Hello, everyone, and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Mikel Elam. Hey, Mikel, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Craig?
Great. I'm excited for this interview. Excuse me. I saw. I was kind of familiar with your work, but I was able to do sort of a deep dive on some of the images I found of yours on the web. So I wanted to just bring a few up to
Okay.
share with people, for the people who don't know you, to talk about your work. So naturally, I think the first one that I brought up, this piece is a stunner. I love this piece. How
Oh,
big is
thank
this?
you. That is a small work, which is rare for me. It's actually 11 by 14,
Hmm.
and I actually donated it to an in-liquid auction, and it's now owned by a collector named Danny Simmons, who's also an artist.
I love the white lines. Just
Thank
gives it an
you.
extra pop that you don't have that in all your other works, but this one it works.
Yeah. One of the things is when I have a tendency when I work small, I actually uh, go into sort of more into a tunnel vision with it. So more lines, more, you know, details at times.
I brought this piece up. This one,
Yeah.
it reminds me, the background and the figure was very. Do you know the work of Ben Shahn?
Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
yeah. It kind of gives me a little bit of Ben Shahn feeling about it. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's atmosphere or what, but
Yeah.
way removed at the same time.
Yeah. That one's called The Outsider. And of course, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've done a lot of exploration of myself and how I factor into the world of being an artist of color, and also just other people, observations of other people and how they fit into the world. So I'm reflecting back on different periods of my life, and that's not a self portrait. It's just a I've lived in a lot of urban places like New York and LA, and just how, you know, like how visible I actually really was or am.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's very telling that the figure really only takes up about a third, if maybe even a quarter of the entire picture. So
Yeah.
it's sort of pushed back a little bit. And I love
Yeah.
I really like the offset of the unfinished parts of it. So it really helps you focus on the face, and that shirt is just, there's so much to that.
Oh,
Good
thank
good
you.
piece.
Thank you so
And
much.
then this is a larger piece. Is that right?
Yes, this is a really big piece. In fact, I have someone interested in it right now, but they're trying to figure out whether they have the space for it. And and it's called The Lovers. And it's I've been kind of really tagging myself as an Afrofuturist. And what that means is basically moving into the future. So there's a bit of this, and a lot of my work is imagined. It's not based on, no, I sometimes will work from photo references. And if I get a real person who will let me draw them or something, I might incorporate that into a painting. But technically, a lot of times, only partially does that happen, and then I let my imagination take over, and also the paint and the surface and all,
Hmm. Yeah,
that
well,
kind
that's what attracted me to this piece. It was my entryway, which was actually the textures that you put into this, the surfaces, and the fact that on the one figure's arm, those little white dots are repeated in the background, so the figure is both of the space and his own his own person. I really enjoyed that.
yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
That one worked. And then
Yeah.
this one,
Oh,
tell me about
yeah.
this one.
So that's in a private collection now. As of last year, it was acquired by and I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to say this. It's at the FMC building,
Hmm.
and it's a part of the Berwyn collection now. And so it's a it's a piece that sort of deals with spiritual practices and sort of my sort of armchair observation of it. Like from different cultures, there are different practices and ways of reaching this sort of inner consciousness and or diving into self in a way. So that's pretty much what the piece is about. It's a collage. It's basically two paintings in one in terms of that part of that the collage in that painting was a painting that I didn't like, and I cut it up and I used parts of it in this painting.
Hmm. Is that the floating shapes at the top?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they have a specific reference, or are they just used because they're wonderful shapes?
Well, I looked at them as a sort of a cloud-like sense, like sort of like the sky and things that float around. But it's more of I'm more than that. I have a meditation practice, and a lot of times when I'm in doing my practice with my eyes closed, there are these sort of floating things that are happening,
Hmm?
and they remind me of clouds in a way, or they're just like unidentifiable objects.
Hmm. Well, I enjoy the language of marks that you've been able to create, and it's clear to me that this isn't an overnight thing. You've been
Yeah,
developing this language for years, if not decades, and I can see that in the works. So
yeah,
so that really makes me wonder about the language of like the ellipse of roses that are here, and how that
yeah,
how does it relate to all the figures. So I'm curious about
yeah.
that.
Well,
I mean,
okay, so you're okay. I Many of when I'm working in collage, I used to be just specifically working in paint only. But with collage and found objects, it's sort of as you're building my painting, I there may be things that resonate to me because I have a pile of things that I'm looking at on the sidelines, much like you have your palette of color, and then I'll have like another sort of area full of like papers and you know collected things. And somehow, as I'm building a piece, I might look over into the pile of collages, and there is exactly the right thing that belongs in this piece. And in this case, this is about this is the story of a woman who um, basically is saying that uh, she was lied to in a way. so
okay.
she's basically she's sitting there and she's like contemplating like her life and the lies that were told to her.
Is is the liar behind her, peeking at her?
The liar could be behind her, peeking
Okay,
at her.
because I see the eye, and I'm just
Yes,
wondering
you
if
see the
that
eye.
second
Yeah,
figure. Okay,
exactly.
and this it's funny. This type of blue, has been making its way this week in a lot of my conversations. I just had one with
Uh,
Tom Judd, and he and I both love this same blue.
yeah,
it's just so striking,
it's a
especially when
favorite of
you combine it.
absolutely. It's a favorite of mine too.
Yeah. Well, it means so much. It's a loaded color, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I just find it fascinating. So
Yeah,
so I've got a few questions I want to ask you, and
yeah,
I always sort of start and end these conversations with the same questions because I find them very fascinating. What was your first exposure to art, like in your memory, looking back when you were a child? Was there a was there an aha moment when you got
yes.
what was that?
The aha moment was third grade. It comes with a bit of a slight sad story, but not
Hmm.
completely sad. My father passed away suddenly. He had a heart attack when I was 8 years old, and
That's third grade.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I'm in class, and he's no longer around. I've accepted that. I'm in class, and it's drawing. It's actually art class time, and because everything happened basically in one classroom, and so I'm painting. And I had already, one earlier thing to add to that was my father had already started teaching me to draw. He could draw, and I would sit with him and sort of, first I would watch him, and then he would ask, get me to like sort of join in. And but I had no idea that I actually had, anything that would stand out. And so I'm in third grade, and we have watercolors we're working on. And my teacher walks over to me, and she just started hoovering over my shoulder, which made me nervous. And I can remember it clearly. And she said, "What are you doing?" And then I thought I was perhaps going to get yelled at, that I was
Right.
doing something wrong. And then I said, "Well, I'm drawing, painting." And she was like, "And why did you choose that?" And then I started to tell her, they were kind of like my version of like flowers. And she kept, then she started to like, "Here, why don't you try this? Here, try this.
Uh-huh.
Here." And so every class it began to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And then before I knew it, I at the end of, almost, I forget if it was in the spring of that year, she says, "There's a bulletin board out front, and I want you to take all your art. We're going to take all your artwork and make a full bulletin board show." So that was my first solo exhibition.
That's great. That's great. It's amazing how many artists I talk to have this same kind of thing early on where it's like one person encourages and
Yeah,
it snowballs from there. Uh,
yeah.
I just love this. So catch me up from third grade. At what point did you start considering yourself an artist or start making art as a potential lifetime thing?
Well, okay, so it was difficult for me to. I always wanted to be an artist from, I think, fifth or the sixth grade, but family kept jumping in and telling me I should be something else. And
That's
even
very
as I
common too.
mentioned it, yeah. And so I would mention it, and it was like my mother would say, "No, you don't want to be a poor artist." So there was always that sort of negative thing. But I continued to draw. So then finally, I had an opportunity to think about high school, which high school I wanted to go to. And I decided that I wanted to go to this high school called Dobbins High School. And the reason why was because they had an art program, and it was mostly commercial art. But I thought in the back of my head, if I learn how to be a commercial artist, then I can work at it. And then I can also do something, else, like
Hmm.
in terms of like my own personal painting and stuff, but at least I could justify why I'm an artist,
Hmm.
especially if I can get a job.
Right.
So I got in, and it was mostly about graphic design, mostly about some, layouts and things like that, and like a little bit of illustration. But my teacher said to me at a certain point, "Mikel, you are a painter. Hands down, you are a painter. You need to think about putting together a portfolio."
Hmm.
And
It's
and
so
and,
nice
and he helped me.
when I hear artists that start out and they have to take other jobs, but somehow they can still find jobs within the arts in some fashion. And
Yeah,
then they find out how they can get their job to help support them in more than just money. So that,
yeah,
I love that. So I'm going to skip a little bit ahead,
yeah,
actually a lot ahead to your current practice.
yeah.
Um, I'm curious how your creative practice currently works. And here's what I mean by that. When you go to make a work of art, do your ideas about what you're going to do come first, or do you do you grow the ideas as you grow the picture?
A bit of both.
Bit of both.
I generally have an idea, like I'm working on a series right now. I generally have some loose sketches a lot of times. Now I don't do the really tight drawings like I used to, because because drawings don't translate to paint the same way anymore for me. And so what I do is I usually have part of it's in my head, the other part's on paper, and then I go in, and then the paint's going to take it somewhere else. So then what I just start doing is laying down really loose, strokes everywhere, and getting kind of really messy with it. And then by that time, I start to bring some of the imagery that may have been in my sketchbook or in my head into the painting.
Have you always kept sketchbooks?
Yes, yes, always.
And so do you always, is it part of your practice to always start with the sketchbook?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a bit of both. That's why I'm, if I could add this, there were some people at my studio the other day, and they were like looking through my work, and they were just like, I can't believe how you just sort of shift from one thing to the other, like different like modes of like working. They can see it, how like that body of work almost looks like a different body of work than another pile. And I
Hmm.
said, because part of it is I don't want to get bored with, I don't want
Right.
to bore myself, and I don't want the work to start to look too staid either.
Hmm. Hmm. I always love the philosophy that I think of the Buddhist philosophy about it. Did you ever hear it's never the same river twice? You ever hear that?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
even though you're the same artist every day, you're a little bit different. So
Yeah.
to have the work stay the same doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it does for you either, because you're a
Yeah.
different person, and so your ideas also flow. They flow like
That's
water.
right.
So
That's right.
so when I like the collage bits that you
Yeah.
do, and I really shouldn't call them bits. They're more than that. That they're integral to the images themselves.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know where's your source materials come from? Where are you getting these faces and eyes and parts?
Everywhere. Was okay. So I was like one of these, like kind of for a while. I used to take my own photographs of things. I would just go around in the streets, take photographs of people, things. It was up, in the back of my mind, maybe to develop that, but I never did. But what I did was, which was something I learned even all the way back to Dobbins, is like having like source files, just like gathering up work and saving it, and like
Mm-hmm.
images, they go, even if you don't use it, they go somewhere, they're put
Yeah.
somewhere.
Do you
Yeah.
ever do people go through your source files when they come to your studio? Are they like, oh, I got to see what this is, or do you keep them
No,
out?
no, I haven't like revealed those source
Okay,
files to
you
most
don't want to
people.
ruin the magic. I get
No.
it. So have you ever
I might show the right person, but no one's really asked, so I'm not
okay.
offering.
Have you ever shown your sketchbooks like actually in a gallery setting?
No, well, I plucked images out of my sketchbook, which it were in shows.
Right.
So there was a series, even just a couple shows back, that were out of my sketchbook that I felt were really, really strong and developed and would tie into the body of work.
Okay. So one of the things I was curious about looking at your work with a closer eye
Yeah.
was, the subject matter that you have. And the first question I usually ask myself is I always wonder, are your works, do you consider them autobiographical? I mean, I know there's always going to be a piece of you in it if you want it there or not. But I'm thinking more about, you know, when you have life events or something like that, do you find yourself putting those into your images? Is that constant?
Absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely. And I consider even the images, if they're of other people, it's really, I mean, maybe every artist can say this because it's kind of how what they're thinking about and what they feel. But I kind of feel like for myself that the images that I'm putting in there are I'm observing. I'm like I'm
Hmm.
like I'm thinking about something. Sometimes it could be the news. Sometimes it could be a conversation with someone.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's my my practices with meditation, and they all kind of like take my thoughts somewhere, and then I want to like record it.
So does this mean that if I come to your studio, you're going to tell me the story behind that liar painting? Like who's the real
well,
liar?
well, yeah. Well, the that painting actually is no longer in my possession.
Oh,
It's
okay. That's okay.
gone.
That's okay. So your stories
Yeah,
in your work, the content in your work, your stories,
yeah,
um, they seem paramount to the pictures that you make.
yeah.
And I was wondering, has it always been that way? Did you
Um,
ever make work that wasn't about a story? Did you?
I am a storyteller,
Okay.
but I would say my earlier works were less about storytelling.
Okay.
They were much more kind of like uh, looser, more about the paint color than it was about the imagery.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but a lot changed for me when I started traveling, and in my travels was when I started, and I now I keep a journal. I started journaling on and off, not consistently when I started traveling in my younger years. But now journaling factors in a lot of things I'm thinking about and sort of clarifying them. So,
That would be fascinating. So the pieces that I selected and the pieces that I found were mostly paintings and some collages.
yeah.
Um, I'm if it exists, maybe I just didn't see it, but I was curious. Do you ever make? Do you ever do any printmaking?
Not a lot.
Okay, all
I
right.
had a recent experience. Well, recent when I say it in the last 4 years,
Uh-huh.
I had a recent experience where I got a fellowship to make a print at the Brandywine
Right.
Workshop and Archives,
Uh-huh.
and
Did you like that?
that I liked it. And
Okay.
it's funny that conversation has popped up several times with other artists that
Mhm.
were apparently in a similar situation, painters that were like not used to printmaking,
Yeah.
and that particular place, it was fun, but
Uh-huh.
it could really drive you crazy too.
I can tell if you're not a printmaker. So I grew up being a printmaker painter, right? So I
Yeah,
love the process and it's intermingled. But I could
yeah,
totally see if you're just sort of thrown into the mix there,
yeah,
the nuance to get the plates or whatever you're using to do what
yeah.
you want. It can be a real challenge. I'm also curious. Have you ever explored making prints of your paintings? Just because as a struggling artist, it can often be a great revenue stream. Have you
Only
ever considered it?
marginally.
Okay.
Only marginally. I've made some prints. Okay, so we're as a visual artist, you're always at some different degree of financial, whether you're doing well or not. So early on, I think I like tried the table shows and all those kinds of things, like outside events.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I discovered that people did not want to spend the money for an original, especially in those like, and understandable.
Hmm.
And so I would try to make prints from that. The only problem was that I couldn't. I my aesthetics were so high
Hmm.
that I didn't want to make just like a poster print. I wanted to make something nicer, but then the
Hmm.
price gets more expensive as you do it. And
Hmm.
so, but in the last, since the Brandywine, I've made a print of one of my paintings uh, as a request for someone who could not afford the painting.
Hmm.
And now, of course, there are incredible places that you can have these things made,
Yeah.
with the great paper and all of that. And then the last part of this answer is, I just did an album cover, and we got together and we had like a series of 10 of these covers made on really beautiful paper, and it was from my paintings
Hmm.
basically. So, yeah.
Real quick on
Yeah.
this one question, aside from prints, have you ever done sculpture?
I it's so funny, you're hitting all of my chords. So I've only done some clay things like
Okay.
early on in school, and never had the space for both because
Okay. Oh, I totally
sculpture.
get that.
Yeah,
That's why I work on paper so much. The space
yeah,
is it's a
yeah,
killer. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Space is still an issue.
we're definitely
And
going to have some conversations after this about, prints and sculptures and stuff, because I
yeah.
what you're saying is making me think of other things that I definitely want to talk to you about. But unfortunately, I only have time for my one last question.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so this is a fun question. I love asking all artists because everybody answers it differently, but they all kind of mean the same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you might get it easy, it might be difficult, who knows? So my last question is, what does making art do for you?
Making art is it is the most incredible way for me to dive into myself. It is literally has never failed me there. It allows me to feel exhilarated, and I could be any age when I'm making art.
I feel you. If I don't do it, I get cranky. So
Yeah.
I
That
love
too.
it. Yeah. um, so I want to thank you so much for coming by. I know when I have really great guests, it just breezes by real fast. So I might end up doing a part two to most of these, like in another year or so. But it was a pleasure talking with you, and a
Same
pleasure
here.
having you listen to you talk about your work as we're actually seeing it. I
Yeah.
want to thank everybody who tuned in today to watch this. Please make sure to like and, most important, subscribe. That gives us the encouragement to make more of these. And, the more people that can come see them, the more it benefits all the artists. So please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, there's a comment section. I can always pass questions on. So again, thank you very much for stopping by today. And I want to thank my wonderful guest, Mikel, today. Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
All right. Take care.